Welcome to Wuchang Fallen Feathers minimal spoiler Madman review. Key was provided by the publisher, but that doesn't affect my opinion of the game, as I try to keep reviews as objective as possible by analyzing the game for what it is, without hype, hate or any other bias. Took me about 50 hours to beat Wuchang on PlayStation 5, but I've spent a lot of it exploring to get all the items possible for guides. Realistically, the game can be beaten in 30 hours or so, I'd assume. Note that I've played the pre-release version, so some things might change already for the release date, which is why, as usual, potential score is added next to current score. Price is $50 or euros, which is really fair since it is a proper game, but it does have a bunch of skins in pre-order and deluxe editions, which is an automatic minus. Skins matter in games, especially third-person RPGs. It's in the name, role-playing, after all. Selling skin sets, meaning skin removal from games to include it in bollocks editions, is something I will never support and will always condemn. But the game price is not at maximum, so for Wuchang it's not that big of a minus because of it. After all, it's more fair than in most fully priced games that do the same thing. Anyway, let's get on with the review, you sexy bastards. What is Wuchang even? Chinese Dark Souls would be the closest comparison with different combat style. There's lots of similarities even in boss and armor aesthetics, but it does have its own legs to stand on. I'll try a different review format, so let me know what you think about this new style of arranging review from best to worst things about the game. We start with what the game does best, not of all time, but what it does best compared to other aspects, move on to decent to good stuff, and then into negative territory. If there is nothing to put in a certain category, then that category won't be mentioned. For example, Wuchang in my review won't have a mediocre category because I don't know what I'd put there. So let's start with the best things about Wuchang first. One of the game's best aspects are locations and the world. From an aesthetic standpoint, it's impeccable. So many details in each location, with each region being brilliantly connected. Can be convoluted at times, but areas are mostly smaller than what the first impression implies. I can't recall a single weak area that doesn't have at least a beautiful vista or two, distant parts of the world that we are going to visit eventually in the background, just like in Dark Souls. Great environment like in the beautiful avian forest or snowy Cloudspire. A ridiculously detailed endgame area. Each area is like a simpler maze that is connected through shortcuts opened by progressing and exploring. Exploration is usually quite rewarding due to stuff like hidden spells, rare upgrade materials, which this game does probably the best out of all the modern games that I've played, occasional weapon, lore bits and pieces. There's not that much to explore, but there's just enough to make it fit nicely into the world structure. Two negatives about the world and locations. Runs from nearest boss checkpoint to the boss, which really pisses me off in Soul games as it just wastes time unnecessarily. Another thing is there's quite a bit of texture popping on PlayStation 5 when playing in better framerate mode. Continuing with the best category. Weapon crafting system. One of the better systems that I've seen. First, I have to commend the brilliant idea to connect weapon upgrades with materials through the character leveling tree. Don't know how to phrase this in English so that it is easily understandable, so I'm going to explain it like I'm retarded. Only one material for weapon upgrades is in the game. It comes in 4 tiers, each tier connected to early, mid and late game. We don't upgrade individual weapons, but weapon types with that material. So by, let's say, upgrading spears to +5 in the skill tree, every spear is going to be +5, no exceptions. It's a brilliant system that I was hoping someone would be able to come up with for some time to substitute the monotonous material grinding that is present in Souls games, which serves only one purpose, and that is to artificially prolong game time. Truly groundbreaking system that I haven't seen yet in Souls-likes. These upgrade materials are usually off the progression path and guarded by a powerful enemy. Next great thing about the weapons are benediction and tempering systems. Benediction system works like this. Each weapon has 3 slots to put runes in. Each rune offers a unique boost. This allows for a decent amount of combinations. Runes also have set bonuses, but in my opinion that part of the system is underutilized as only few runes are part of the set, so it's difficult to combine without gimping the build a bit. Some benedictions also need much clearer translations, as a bunch of them sound way too similar. Next to benedictions there is tempering. Tempering is connected to the feathering part of the story. Basically, the feathery part of protagonist's arm grants the tempering option, which allows buffing any weapon with additional benefits like fire, corruption, blight, thunder, frostbite, health leech and poise break options. So with this system they have removed again the grind for items in other Souls-likes that are required to apply a certain element to a weapon. Tempering the arm can benefit weapons in other ways, by increasing scaling of offensive attributes, making tempering more powerful in general, or to last longer. Again, they could have done more with it by introducing more options, but when combined with benediction and unique weapons, it does offer enough. Weapons are overall fantastic visually, with small aesthetical details that make them very distinctive. Animations are incredible too, and sound effects are really good. Kill satisfaction is somewhere around mediocre to decent. Could have done more with kills. On top of great animations and unique aesthetics, they have unique bonuses too, where if used with tempering in a certain way we could get more out of them. There are 5 weapon categories: longsword, dual swords, spear, one-handed sword and axe. Differences between same category weapons comes in disciplines, next to unique tempering opportunities. Discipline is something like arts in Elden Ring. Some weapons come with unique disciplines with additional interchangeable discipline that can be something like being able to block or evade an attack in a different way. Interesting thing about Wuchang's combat are the combat mechanics. Again, another incredible idea is the Skyborn Might system. Whenever a player dodges any attack perfectly or by successfully performing combos, Skyborn Might is acquired. Skyborn Might is used to cast spells, buff disciplines and make heavy attacks faster. It is a great system because we get to use spells as many times as we want as long as there is enough Skyborn Might. Also, spamming most spells is difficult due to higher Skyborn Might requirements. That means no easy way out by just spamming OP spell. There's a couple more great combat mechanics that bring the combat up in quality a ton due to its obvious flaws. Developers have figured out that combat framework is mediocre at best, so instead of fixing that, they have introduced mechanics like clash, alacrity, shimmering and a bunch of skill tree upgrades that reduce damage received mid-attack, on top of defensive disciplines. Dual blades have the ability to clash if the enemy has a weapon, but it doesn't work against unarmed attacks. Basically, if attacking at the same time as the enemy, weapons can clash, which deflects damage. Whole combat mechanic system is very well thought out to substitute for a much weaker combat framework that I'll cover later. Last part of the best aspect category is the skill tree. It's interestingly done in a way where each part of the tree is associated with weapon type, while the right side of the tree is associated with spells, crafting and general upgrades. Next to a bunch of passives and active disciplines, there are attribute upgrades as well. This makes character progression more balanced, but it also gives enough options to play with. Whether the player wants to wield 2 sets of different weapon types at once, maybe only one weapon with focus on spells, go to different skill tree paths to upgrade specific attributes further. There's enough to play with here, even though it might seem limiting at first. Thankfully, quite a bit of passive upgrades that grant boosts in combat through specific actions or requirements, and few unlockable disciplines to play with for each weapon next to many spell and tempering options in the skill tree is more than enough. Moving on to decent to good category. Wuchang tells a story about the Ming Empire and the land of Shu in a supernatural setting. Historical characters make an appearance too. Story is divided amongst Wuchang, the protagonist with amnesia, and the land of Shu with all the nasty events happening there. It's all connected, of course, as we uncover more about the land, feathering disease, lost tribes, search for the cure, Wuchang's family history. What is particularly good is how some parts of the game are depicted with lore being preserved. For example, a certain palace preparing for the wedding banquet is full of young and monstrous women that were taken from the outskirts we first had to pass through to get to the palace. Scattered bits of lore pieces tell the ominous story of the prince's mother trying to find the best bride. Then more details surface that uncover monstrosities done, which culminates with interesting boss aesthetics. Lore overall is quite good, with the details nicely spread out. Items also have quite a bit of info on them that give more details, like in true Dark Souls fashion. Story does have some pacing issues because I've often forgot what was going on with the overarching plot and instead focused on the regional stuff more, but it's overall a good story with some interesting twists towards the end. There are also multiple endings that I haven't seen yet, and mine ended a bit strange, but I might have missed a thing or two. Would have to give New Game Plus playthrough, but no time at the moment. Only real negative is that the main character is fixed and we can't create it ourselves. It's a beautiful character to look at with sexy costumes, especially deluxe edition ones, but as the functionality of the character, there was no reason not to have a character creator in an action RPG like this. Wuchang says 2 lines throughout the whole game. Not a big deal though, but creating our own character would be a better option. Another decent to good thing is armor. There's quite a few sets that offer resistances against each elemental status and physical damage types. That's their purpose. Choosing proper armor sets does help against tough enemies, but in the end mostly comes down to mitigating physical damage as much as possible, or to balance physical with status effect resistance. Armor sets aesthetically look great as there's quite a few to choose from, and there's an easy way to change armor appearance, meaning to transmogrify it, which is a welcome option, like in every RPG. There is no equipment encumbrance system though, which would definitely make things quite a bit deeper. No armor set bonuses too. The way combat plays out, it might be even better that there is no effect on movement. Which takes us to subpar category. While combat mechanics are really good and elevate the combat tremendously, the combat framework is subpar. Attacks that should hit miss, there's lots of slopes and uneven ground where combat becomes quite clunky, too many instant attack animations leading to cheap difficulty, and the whole combat is based around tracking attacks, even though there is a big focus on attacking enemies from behind for increased poise damage. Enemies tend to track even mid-attack and in mid-air, which does make combat appear at times low quality, like indie combat quality. Thankfully, combat mechanics allow mitigation of such subpar combat framework, where in lots of cases boss fights appear as 2 homing missiles are clashing at each other. While enemy and boss diversity is quite good, behavioral AI is atrocious. 90% of enemies do the same thing, which is attack forever with the full extent of their arsenal. This makes fights predictable. Basically first 2 or 3 boss fights and each one after plays the same, even though each boss does have a nice amount of unique moves, but the way they use them is always the same. Enemies have no stamina bar, unlike the player, so they just spam moves in hope something hits. Combat mechanics again help in making some of the fights play out quite cinematically cool at times, but methodically there ain't much going on. Great thing is that 5 weapon categories can make each encounter play out a bit different, but it doesn't fix the enemy AI issue or lack thereof. So overall, while the enemy design is alright, the combat framework is subpar to mediocre, while the AI is atrocious. Another thing to add in subpar category is that the game kinda drags out a bit in the last section, or maybe I just wanted it to end already due to the worst things about this game, which goes into bad category and our difficulty design and the balancing. Balancing is truly bad in this pre-release version and it affects the game everywhere. It does kill the atmosphere a bit because of either lack of challenge or annoying challenge. First 10 hours or so the game is quite easy, which is fine because I thought they were getting players into it while explaining the mechanics. Then a certain commander boss comes into play where difficulty drastically rises. Nothing can prepare players for such a change. Then it becomes easy again until Avian Forest, where things ramp up again in a bad way. Cheap deaths start occurring more and more, with enemies killing Wuchang in 2 hits, getting pushed from narrow paths into instant death, ranged enemies being insanely annoying, and a horrible boss that showcases the best all the things I've said are subpar and bad about the game. Stupid damage with almost each hit, relatively big health bar, constant aggression, instant attack animations that can take 50% or more health, grab attack that goes over 50%, and it ends up being an annoying fight more than anything else. This is where the game starts to become more and more annoying, as each problematic boss, of which there are only few, and almost every stronger enemy is problematic because of constant aggression complemented with 2-shot kill ability. The worst way of trying to create more difficult encounters, because it devalues the whole combat system with cheap deaths, where the player does great things 90% of the time, but then gets caught with 2 hits, which is quite easy to be hit by due to constant attack spam. How combat works and how easy it is to get stuck in an animation while exchanging blows with stronger enemies, that comes too easily, which creates the sense of cheapness that increases more and more as the game progresses. Especially in the last section, which is why I wanted it to end. Not because it was difficult, but because it was annoying as heck. Any large enemy kills in 2 or 3 hits max. I get that larger enemies should strike harder, which is obviously fine, but then they shouldn't spam attacks non-stop. Perfect time for a Madman segment that I include occasionally if something pisses me off. Lately, balancing and difficulty design in games is so bad that it seems to be the norm now, especially in action RPGs. So many cheap things to increase death count when they cannot create continuous, at least somewhat balanced difficulty progression, where players can be challenged in more methodical confines. You know, like in Dark Souls games. People don't seem to understand, lots of developers too, how difficult it is to create methodical and atmospheric boss fights where the player gets challenged in the confines of the system. Granted, with few easy fights here and there. That's one of the reasons what makes Dark Souls games so special and why it started the whole Souls-like craze. Not because enemies kill the player in 2 hits with AI doing the same thing, which is just spamming moves, but it's because there are layers of what the enemies are trying to do to get the player out of rhythm. To be able to surprise, and to not cheat the system just to be able to defeat the player cheaply because they can't create meaningful fights inside the confines of the system that player operates under. In Wuchang, due to how bosses and stronger enemies operate and without any balancing, meaning either they are easy or annoyingly cheap, next to the subpar combat framework, the only fights that I actually look forward to repeating are the demon fights that relieve madness, and such fights aren't many. Combat shines the most in such fights thanks to its mechanics despite its flaws. This takes me to the final verdict. Wuchang is a pleasant surprise in many ways, but in this pre-release version atrocious balancing and difficulty design at times bring the game down throughout the most of the experience. Bosses and stronger enemies are forgettable due to these problems. It affects the atmosphere too and overall enjoyment. However, I am not forgetting all the great stuff this game does, so the optimal score range for the pre-release version is between 5 and 7 in my opinion, and I'm giving it a 6, which translates to a decent game. Over time, I'm sure many patches are going to be implemented that fix to a degree most of the issues. If that happens, I think Wuchang can reach a score of 8 for me, which would translate to a great game, but it would need proper optimization of these aspects. They have done great where most non-From Software Souls-likes fail, which says a lot too. In the end, remember that every score is subjective. I can only rate my experience and that's it. Can't say if you're going to like the game, love it, hate it, dislike it or be lukewarm towards it, or if it's worth buying for you. My goal is to give you a decent analysis so that you can come to an educated decision based on the things said and seen. Thank you for watching and let me know if this new review format is better than the previous one. Patreon, subscribes or merch links are in the description if that sort of stuff is of interest to anyone.